And this is per, I believe, per the director's testimony, so I want to give you a chance to respond. In past meetings regarding SBI personnel issues, you've invited DPS leadership and an SBI general counsel. What was different about the October meeting, and why wasn't the SBI's general counsel invited?
As mentioned, I would always contact the Director Schurmeier about the meeting, and he had the flexibility to bring who he would like to that meeting.
Okay. And just still referencing these along the lines of the meetings, is that typically how, if there was a complaint filed in another department or anything like that, you reach out to the department head, say we want to schedule a meeting? Is that typical kind of standard of practice across all departments?
So I think this is a great time to talk about the unique situation of how SBI is housed, and that it is an independent agency, and that it does operate differently than, for example, cabinet agencies. And so respecting that, what I would do is, as the information came to me, I was certain Director Schurmeier would want to know this information himself, and so I would go to the leader of that particular agency and talk to him.
So it's safe to say that that would be the first point of contact, would be the director or head person in the agency?
For this unique agency that is an independent agency. So with Director Schurmeier, yes, sir.
Okay. Do you have any idea, and again, we're not, we weren't sitting in the meetings, but do you have any idea why he would categorize those as threatening or intimidating in those meetings?
No, sir, and I would dispute his characterization. I will say, the questioning today, I don't think you all intend that to be intimidating, and our conversations have never been anything like some of the questioning today, and so we would always lead those meetings and have a handshake and a smile, so I dispute his characterization of those meetings.
And one thing, and in the spirit of saying here's what he said, and we would like a response to it to get to the bottom of it, I believe it was alluded to in his, or directly said in his testimony, that there was a threat of an investigation or something like that. I don't know if it was into a complaint. I don't know. Does the governor's office have any authority to launch an investigation into an independent agency?
So first of all, sir, I'd like to make it clear that we talked about doing a review. When allegations of violations come to your attention, usually what happens is somebody makes the allegation, somebody disputes the allegation. And the way it usually happens is, the way it works best is to bring some third-party group in to do an analysis of what was said, to do some fact-finding and see if it's true, if it's not true. And so what we talked to Director Schurmeier, and still contend that there should be a review needed to have these kind of discussions and do this type of assessment. So I want to make it clear, not an investigation. It was just a review, an HR personnel review of the facts and the allegations that were made.
Thank you, Ms. Toll. And Mr. Fletcher, the same question to you. At any point during those meetings, was the director asked to resign or threatened in any way that something would happen if he didn't resign? Do you have any response to that?
Again, I think the subject of your question is protected by the State Personnel Act, so I don't think I can answer your question.
Okay. And just in conclusion, thank you both. Ms. Gray, the director testified that he was invited to a meeting on October 3rd with Kristi Jones and Eric Fletcher. They were threatening to investigate him if he didn't resign. Do you have any inclination of why you weren't invited to that meeting? And not the subject of the meeting, just the relationship, why you may have not been asked to attend.
Again, the rules of professional conduct prohibit me from disclosing any information that I gained in my role as the general counsel to the SBI.
And I believe that he has waived his privilege on the relationship. Is there, and again, not the content, not the personnel case, just the relationship you had.
The privilege is different than the rule of confidentiality.
So again, the attorney-client privilege is different than the rule of confidentiality under Rule 1.6 of the Rules of Professional Conduct. While Director Schurmeier, through legal counsel, may have waived the attorney-client privilege, I do not believe that he can waive client confidentiality under Rule 1.6 of the Rules of Professional Conduct.
And the last question I'll ask is just in general terms. We're not talking about any specific relationship. Maybe just better as a legal question. Is your fiduciary duty to the director? I believe you stated that in the opening line of questioning. Your relationship is to him, and any communication you have through the governor's office would be he would be privy to that, correct?
So again, the rules of professional conduct prohibit me from discussing specifics, specific information that I gained in my role as general counsel. However, I can say that the rules of professional conduct would allow me to have communications, obviously with the knowledge and permission of my client, Director Schurmeier, and I have never knowingly violated those rules of professional conduct.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Representative Johnson, you have approximately a minute remaining. Representative Dahl, the chair is not sure whether you were trying to get my attention to be on the list or if you were trying to get my attention for Representative Cunningham. Would you like to ask some questions? You are recognized to ask questions.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Chair. First off, I need to set my understanding, and so I'll need to ask Representative Johnson some questions and/or Representative Warren. I want to understand, at what point did Director Schurmeier reach out to the committee to express his desire to provide testimony? And what specifically about his request, you guys are off the hook for a minute, prompted oversight by this committee?
Wanted to make sure my memory served correct from his testimony, and I believe that it does, that he had originally reached out to the Speaker's office. I don't know if he had someone there that he'd worked with in the past, and at that point, this committee had been created to look into matters like that, and so it was referred over here. That was the way I believe he described it in his testimony.
Okay, so, and I don't agree with that, so but thank you for that answer. So the other question is about the fact that the minority only received 9 minutes of notice about the director's testimony, and were given no opportunity to prepare questions. Members of the majority had questions and had at least 2 hours. Were given questions, documents prepared by staff. So this speaks to my earlier point where I feel like you have to be prepared when you're going to be asked questions, and if somebody's going to waive privilege, this is indeed important, because then you can, the truth is the truth. You are correct, Representative Warren, or Chair Warren, but you also have to refresh your memory, because we're talking about things that happened last year. So let me get on with my question. I would ask that we all are given the same information at the same time. I am extremely concerned at how this is handled, how this entire thing has been handled, because I think what we're doing is we're listening to one characterization of a conversation and placing that same characterization upon these 3 people. I also, during our training on oversight committees, I thought it was clear that this should not be a partisan issue, but what this should be is an inquiry and a general inquiry. So I guess I'm done with my statements, and it wasn't really a question. So I'm going to ask the committee some questions now. Some members of the committee have alleged that your office's discussion with Schurmeier regarding workplace practices at the SBI have been politicized. I'm a little confused because if I look back at my agency history, in 2014, were any of you, were Kristi Jones or Eric Fletcher, were either of you in the office that you occupy now?
No.
No, ma'am.
And to the best of your knowledge, who was the governor at that time?
I think it was Governor McCrory.
You're right. Ding, ding. You got it right. So, in 2016, Governor McCrory appoints Bob Schurmeier as SBI Director. So my question is, and at that point, your boss, Roy Cooper, said, this is going to be a problem if we move the SBI over because it's going to put it under the governor's purview. Is that your understanding of what has happened with the SBI?
I think the concerns about when it was moved from the Attorney General's office and the concerns that you all still face is accountability. I think it needs to be an independent agency with regards to the work that it does, and it is such of that. But I think also, and I think Director Schurmeier testified himself about the need for checks and balances and where that accountability stands. Obviously, the State Bureau of Investigation is currently housed and administratively housed in the Department of Public Safety, and I think that has been both helpful to the State Bureau of Investigation with regards to funding and projects and other types of support that they needed. So I think the issue is just assuring and helping with accountability.
The other question is, while Director Schurmeier did not allege in his testimony that the governor's office had interfered in investigations, it was nevertheless implied by some members of the governor's office engaged in political pressure to affect the Bureau. To your knowledge, has the governor or any of his staff ever interfered with an active SBI investigation or insisted that an investigation be opened or closed?
Not at all.
So, and I have one more question. So, Ms. Gray, when did you start your employment with the SBI? Was it in 2022?
No, ma'am, it was 2011.
Okay. So you have worked through several iterations of different offices.
Yes, I've had 4 directors at the SBI that I have served.
Okay. And they have, is this the first time anything like this has ever happened?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you, Representative Dahl. You have approximately 3.5 minutes remaining if you'd like to come back. And the chair would just hesitate for a moment to address an issue. In regards of a characterization of a conversation and addressing that, the reason you've been invited here was to respond to that allegation. This is not a partisan issue. As you've pointed out so adeptly, Ms. Jones, we have the greatest respect for the SBI, and we have a firm belief in its independence and its necessity to be an independent agency to ensure the trust of the general public in that agency. So the waiving of confidentiality by the director attorney is absolutely a surprise to me, and how you want to respond to it is entirely up to you. But we are here to address those allegations that were made on the 28th of March. Having said that, Representative McNeely, you are recognized for your series of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank y'all for being here today. Real quick, I just have one question for Mrs. Gray, because it looks like she's lawyered up enough. I'm not going to get a whole lot out of her. Curious, though, since being here since 2011, who was it that hired you, or who was above your agency at the SBI then that would have maybe been signed off on your hiring?
Sir, at the time, the SBI was part of the Department of Justice, And at that point, I believe the person that hired me was John Aldridge, who was in the law enforcement liaison section.
Okay.
I had been with the Department of Justice since 1999.
Okay. One question, do you know who the acting attorney general was who would be over the Department of Justice in 2011?
Yes, sir, that would have been then A.G. Cooper, yes.
So now our governor, Roy Cooper, correct?
Yes, sir.
So you would have worked underneath him originally then at the SBI until it was moved to the Department of Public Safety?
That's correct.
Okay. That's all the questions I have for you. I don't think I'm going to get a lot more information out of you until we get a judge to do a court order, but that's a whole nother story. If I could ask of Mr. Fletcher and Mrs. Jones, aside from the meetings with DPS and the governor's office described by Director Schurmeier, has the governor's office been involved in any other personnel matters at the SBI?
Sir, as mentioned, Director Schurmeier and I and lots of other people have had lots of conversation around personnel issues, talked about hiring, we talked about recruitment, retention, need for all of those things, SBI salary. We talked about a lot of things that fall under personnel.
I guess my question is, if it's an independent agency, why did the executive branch feel like that they needed to be the ones to talk to them about hiring practices and what they needed to do and make sure they were diversified?
I think he talked to us as well about what we were seeing in recruitment and retention, about academies, about where to recruit, how to retain. As you know, it's been tough recruiting and retaining, particularly law enforcement officers. So I think it was a conversation, lots of conversations about helping to provide agents training, getting them continuing education, doing all of that could be done to help support agents.
And is it normal practice for y'all to do this with other departments then? Do y'all have constant talks with them about doing diversity hiring and doing all these different things that you just said?
So I wasn't specifically speaking about diversity hiring. I was just talking about hiring in general at the Bureau. You know, every so often they have an academy that graduates new agents that become, so we've talked about general hiring practices. And a lot of agencies have been talking about hiring lately. State government just went through what they termed as the Great Resignation, where unfortunately a lot of people retired, took other jobs. And so there's been lots of discussions about recruiting and retaining good state employees.
So I think the question was asked here by the committee, at least by one, you know, why are we doing this? And to me, it's discover possible allegations of intimidation, threats, and maybe even possible extortion to allow the executive branch to advance their political agendas on independent state agencies. So that's why I think we're having this, because that's what we seem to be looking at uncovering. Now, the question I'll ask, so when the governor's office threatened the director to resign or face an investigation, did you already have somebody in mind to replace him?
Sir, I will dispute your characterization of those conversations and his characterizations of those conversations.
I'm going to take it, you ain't going to tell me who it was. That's fine. Let me ask you this. In your opinion, is the current director of the SBI eligible for what we would call continuing or holdover status, or is he to vacate the role at the end of his term if we have not appointed anybody that was chosen by the governor?
Isn't that what you all are considering?
We are, but I'm just asking, can he continue, in y'all's eyes, in the executive branch, can he continue his office?
Representative McNeely, that's a legal question. I don't know that we have a conclusion on that question right now.
Okay. Because if it takes us time to end up going ahead and accepting the appointee, then my question is, who will be over the SBI at that time? Will the governor's office or the executive branch want to put in an interim, or will we continue as we are?
I'm not sure I'm following, sir.
I guess my question is, do you believe that an appointee can assume the leadership of the SBI before being confirmed?
Sir, what I believe, I think Mr. Fletcher answered to not sure of the legality of that question. So
Representative, you're asking us to give a legal opinion that I just don't know that we have at this moment.
Okay. Just, instead of questions, just like to kind of make a statement. In my personal belief, I feel like that Director Schurmeier was intimidated. I feel like he was, to a point, threatened, and I felt like there was somebody already in mind in place that was to replace him, and because he chose not to resign, we are here today discovering what all went on, and that's why we are in where we're at in these meetings.
Does that conclude your remarks, sir?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative McNeely. Representative Cervini, you are next, but in the interest of time, I'm going to ask you to please keep your questions concise and quickly as possible.
Most definitely, Chair. I will do that. I want to make sure that I do not ask questions of personnel protected and confidentiality, but I do want to piece out what's happening today in the most impartial way possible. So, Attorney Gray, you have spoken that you've been working in the office since 2011. So you've worked under many administrations of both sides of the aisle or both affiliations. But I do want to understand, what is your accountability? Who are you accountable for? And even though you were appointed at one, well, actually you weren't appointed by the governor's office, correct?
Correct. I was not.
And so are you beholden at any point in time as part of your evaluation process integrated with the governor's office?
No, Representative. I'm beholden to the Director Schurmeier, the director of the SBI, or whoever the director of the SBI is.
Yes. So just to make clarity on that, so the director of SBI is the one who evaluates you and your performance of your job within your role,
Correct.
and no one else.
Correct.
Thank you. So let's progress to your role when it comes to when there's EEOC filings. You've alluded to it briefly, but I want to do a differentiation between an employee of SBI versus what we're seemingly to be here today as SBI director, and where your role ends up being in that situation. And if you can't answer certain things, I'll understand. So when it's internal, and there is an EEOC, a complaint, a personnel complaint, what is your role in that situation?
Can't answer specifically. You can say just generally as the attorney for the FBI, here are the things that are part of my job.
So again, just generally, I can't answer specifics. If it's an internal EEO complaint, there are investigators we use the Department of Public Safety investigative team because the SBI does not have its own. I defend the SBI to the best of my ability. I would say the same thing for an external EEO complaint or any other complaint against the SBI. My role is to defend the SBI to the best of my ability.
So if the complaint actually includes an allegation towards the SBI director, what is your role in that?
Generally, if the allegation is against the SBI director in his role as the director, my job is to defend the SBI, including the SBI director.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. At any point in time of your role of doing these things, you're an independent agency, correct? Go ahead.
Correct.
At any time, do you have to integrate the governor's office in any of this in part of your role or defense of the SBI or SBI director in these situations?
No specifics, but you can talk about the financial aspect of that.
So again, the rules of professional conduct prohibit me from discussing any specific information. Generally, however, yes, there may be times when litigation is filed against the SBI, a state agency, that I need to coordinate with if another state agency has been named as a co-defendant. We may need to coordinate managing that litigation or coordinate with other state agencies in terms of budget issues to look at maybe resolving those complaints.
Thank you. And so it's case by case, correct? So it sounds like could be DPS, it could be the governor, but it's not part of your process to have to always include the governor's office in any complaint.
That's correct. It's case by case.
Thank you. And so let's go specifically and let myself be, I want to be clear, because I've been involved in state government and EEOC situations as a boss myself at one point in time. So my understanding is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, personnel issues are confidential for a reason. We have laws to protect, correct?
Correct.
Because I know we usually go into closed session if we're in a different level of government because of certain legality. In this situation, when it comes to the SBI director, help me understand, when was the differentiation between it being specific to the SBI director and where your role ends up being? I don't know if that question.
I'm sorry, Representative, I don't understand your
Yeah,
question.
I'm sorry, and I don't understand what I just asked, so, yeah, I know.
Ms. Gray, the chair's not quite clear on it either.
So let's reverse back. There's a series of meetings that were called upon the governor's office for the SBI director to have a conversation about certain allegations. Did the SBI director have the choice of bringing you in because of your role, correct?
Again, I cannot answer specifics, but in general, the SBI director can request that I attend, and he has in the past requested that I attend meetings.
So, and just to reiterate, Director Schurmeier had the choice. He made the choice of not bringing you.
I can't answer
Okay,
that specifically because, again, I can't speak for him.
Yes.
And I can't answer specific questions that's information I gained in my role as general counsel.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. I'm trying to ask the best question. So we come forward to this situation. You have a lawyer present with you. What made, and you also had expressed that you contact the state board, or state bar, and making sure that you go, you contacted them. What part of the process did you acquire counsel and also got advice from the state bar in the midst of this process?
When I was asked to provide information to this body, and it's been fairly stressful to try and cooperate as much as I can with this body to provide information, while also, one, and first and foremost, protecting my client's interest, which is, again, the State Bureau of Investigation, and two, staying within my ethical boundaries as a licensed attorney and not violating the rules of professional conduct. So when I was requested to give testimony before this body, I wanted to make sure that I did all of those things, and so I consulted with the state bar, and I also consulted and hired legal counsel to make sure that I did not violate my rules of professional ethics.
So for clarification, what time frame was that?
I don't recall exactly, but it would have been when I was contacted to give information to this committee when I received a letter inviting me to come give testimony.
So approximately probably 2 months, 3 months.
It was obviously after Director Schurmeier's testimony, so possibly a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks.
So just last question. or series related. Do you currently work at SBI as their general counsel?
Yes, I do.
And are you currently in full 100% in your role in what you've described as your responsibilities at the agency?
I'm not sure I
Even
understand
with,
your question.
so
I'm
I guess,
sorry.
like this, even with everything with the stress, you're still in the function of the role of SBI General Counsel and all its responsibilities.
Yes, I'm continuing to do my job, yes.
Right. Thank you for that, and I relinquish my time.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Cleveland, you're recognized. And again, sir, remind you of our time constraints.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Gray, I didn't catch it. When you were first hired at the SBI or when you moved to the SBI, you were general counsel from 2011?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Jones, you stated that the director, the SBI director, had full authority to hire anybody and everybody he wanted, yet in his discussion, he pointed out that he tried to hire a liaison and asked the governor's office if there was any problem, and which to me he shouldn't have done. And the governor's office never got back to him, and he lost that person that he wanted, and the governor suggested somebody else. If he had full authority to hire, why did he go to the governor's office, and why didn't the governor's office say, hey, that's your decision?
So, Representative Cleveland, I want to be clear. What I would like to do in the way that I answer is just kind of say that Director Schurmeier had some conflicting information in his testimony as well. So while he might have mentioned that, he also talked about decisions that he made, and he knew the decisions were his, and he decided this or he decided that. So unfortunately, there was some conflicting statements made that give, and you're asking about that one, whereas there are other opportunities where he says that he made those decisions.
That wasn't my question, and it doesn't answer my question. If he did go to the governor's office and he didn't have to, why didn't the governor's office say that's your problem instead of leaving him hanging on the hook for however long it was? I don't understand that, why that happened.
And again, I think that's a mischaracterization he made of the circumstances.
Okay. And I find it disturbing. Why is the governor's office dealing with an EEOC complaint? There are other processes, and I'm not well versed in the processes for these type of complaints, but what's it doing in the governor's office? Why is it being dealt with there?
Sir, you are saying, and I am not agreeing, that the governor's office is dealing with an official EEOC complaint. To your point, there is that process. You all mentioned EEOC. I'm not even sure that the director mentioned EEOC complaint.
I had a distinct impression in the discussions here with Ms. Gray and yourself that it was an EEOC complaint that was being the concern of the governor's office. Am I wrong?
I think some of the members may have mentioned that, but you did not hear me say I'm not allowed to talk about complaints or where they came from or who they came from or what direction.
Okay. General statute gives the governor the ability to appoint a director to the SBI if the General Assembly is not in session. Do you have any indication at all that the governor may want to appoint somebody if his nominee is not confirmed this session?
Sir, as statute required, we made the nomination to you and on or about May 1st, which was required. What happens next will only be, we'll find out.
Okay. And the reason I asked is my understanding is that the present director will stay in office until the confirmation by the House and the Senate. Am I wrong in that assumption? I guess it's not an assumption. That's my understanding of how things work.
Again, I think that's a legal question. It's pretty far outside the scope of the questions that the committee identified for us to discuss today. It's one that I don't know that we can give the governor's office's opinion on that legal question here today.
Okay. The governor's appointed Chief Hawley as the replacement for Ms. Schurmeier. How many people applied for the position of director?
I'm being advised that I can't share who, how many, and those types of things expressed interest in the position.
Well, could you answer, did anyone else besides Chief Hawley be considered for the position?
I'm being told no one else.
I noticed
can't.
that.
Yeah, I can't answer.
Okay. I don't know, I think we'll see a lot of hypocrisy here in both directions, but we'll see where it winds up. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Are you through with your questioning, Representative Cleveland? Chairman Johnson, you're recognized to complete the time.
Again, thank you all for being here. And I know we're running short on time, and I wish we could get deeper into this, but I'd like to circle back to the reason we're here. We had a director come and claim that there was inappropriate communication at the least, collusion and coercion at the worst. And, you know, we've kind of talked around it today, really. But what I wanted to bring out that I've been reading through is just a litany of emails going back to 2019. I'm reading some of these back to as early as July of 2019. And they range between Ms. Jones, Ms. Gray, and I believe William McKinney at the time. Is that your predecessor, Mr. Fletcher?
Mr. McKinney was the general counsel prior to me, yes.
Was there anyone in between that time, or did you take over upon his departure?
I took over shortly after he departed.
Okay. And it's my understanding, and based on testimony that everyone's given today, that no communication between the SBI or the governor's office would have been made without the SBI director being made aware, who you have fiduciary duty to. What I'm seeing here is a communication that he is not copied on, and in his conversations with our counsel has made it aware that he was not blind copied on that and was not made aware of these emails. One of them, I believe from you, Ms. Jones, saying, Angel, will you please keep William, I assume that was the general counsel at the time, up to date on these EEOC complaints. I believe that was later on that day, if not the next day. I believe it was 1 minute later was followed up on, thank you, Angel. Once you have this list, let's touch base at your convenience. And then I believe right after that, approximately 10 minutes later, maybe a little more, it was made aware that that was received. And it's been made aware to us through discussions with counsel that the director was not made aware of these conversations. And again, we're not going to have time to go through everything, but I just wanted to go through a few that I felt were relevant to the testimony today. Jumping ahead to July 31st of 2019, so this is toward the end of the month, or this change started on July 23rd. This is between the attorney, and I will not get into too much, but just because of personnel, but the attorney representing the person filing the EOC complaint, reaching out to Ms. Gray, and then Ms. Gray, you communicating with Ms. Jones on July 31st, to which Ms. Jones, you said, thanks for sharing this. Here's a couple of thoughts from recent conversations I've had with the director. And then this email goes on to kind of give some, I wouldn't go as far to call it legal advice, but some advising on the matters. There is an email in here that the director is copied on, that I'm looking at. The director is copied on, and to me that shows that there is a pattern here of some he is copied on, some he is not. I'd like to jump ahead to the last thread from 2019 from Ms. Gray that says, met with Ms., well, I'll leave her name out, the attorney of the person filing the complaint. We did not resolve anything but left it open to trying to schedule a formal mediation September 26th. Would like to discuss the options when you have a free moment. Mr. McKinney there that time in the governor's office said, be glad to. Can you come by tomorrow in the a.m.? And then Ms. Gray, you said, sure, what time? And Mr. McKinney set up that time. This was in September of 2019. Do you have any recollection of what took place at that meeting in 2019?
So again, the rules of professional conduct prohibit me from disclosing any information that I gained during my role as general counsel. Again, however, I can say that oftentimes someone from a state agency, the SBI, including me, will have a need to discuss matters with someone else from another state agency, whether it be budget matters or pending litigation. The rules of professional conduct prohibit me from having those conversations without the knowledge or permission of my client. And again, I never knowingly violated those rules of professional conduct.
So by saying that, are you saying that the director was aware of these conversations going on?
I can't answer again the specifics. The rules of professional conduct prohibit me from disclosing that specific information. But again, the rules prohibit me from having conversations without the knowledge and permission of my client, and I never knowingly violated those rules of professional conduct.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question, please?
Not at this time, Representative. We are really pressed for time. These folks were kind enough to come over today, and they have a hard stop at 3 o'clock.
So what I'll do, just to get us up a little more, and I'll skip through a little bit, but I want to get us up to more current date. This is September 12th, so just prior to the October meeting. It seems like, Ms. Jones, you reached out to Ms. Gray and said, you know, what is the best way to be in contact? At that point, Ms. Gray, it looks like you provided your cell, and that matches, I won't say it out loud, but that matches up with what we've been given as well. We'll call you after my meeting. Thank you. And in that response, I believe happened 2 minutes later. Then we jump forward to Mr. Fletcher. You've come on board by this point, December 2nd. And it looks like this correspondence in the subject line is SBI Deputy Director. And this, for everybody's reference, is on December 1st, 2021. Says, good afternoon, and this is from Ms. Gray to Mr. Fletcher. Good afternoon. Director Schurmeier asked me to reach out to you regarding any movement on the SBI director appointment. Any status you can provide would be appreciated. I'm in and out of the office. The best way to reach me is via cell, to which he responds back, are you around 3:30 to 4:30? You can give me a call today. We'll do things. Do you remember the subject of those calls, with the subject line being SBI Deputy Director, Mr. Fletcher?
So, no, and I think also I'd want to see documents that you're going to ask me to testify about.
And this is just based on your recollection. I understand these weren't provided ahead of time, and I'm just kind of reading through them really quick here. And then we're going to jump forward to March 10th, 2022. This is from Mr. Fletcher to Ms. Gray. Angel, hope you're doing well. Is there a time we could talk briefly later? And then Ms. Gray responded back, I'm on a quick Teams call right now, but will be available after 11 o'clock, and then reach out to me, and then gives the number again. It seems like there's a pretty, and I'm saying this just to say, I think there's a pretty constant line of communication here between the end of 2021 and through the beginning months. This is March of 2022. Is there any insight we can get on what the subjects of those communications were? Just to add some context.
I mean, you're asking me about two email exchanges that were given that occurred more than a year ago that I haven't seen. So it's really hard for me to give any kind of context about what those conversations were about. I'd also dispute your characterization of kind of regular communication or contact. I've spoken with Ms. Gray on occasion, but I would dispute that characterization.
And I guess the bigger question is, if her fiduciary responsibility is to the director, it would strike me that any communications about a deputy SBI director, ongoing complaints, anything of substance like that, he would need to be privy to, and he would at least need to be read in on what those conversations are being had. And I'll have to go back, but it seems like in his conversations that was not the case, that he was not made aware of these. I can tell based on some emails, actually only one out of that entire thread I was kind of skimming through, he was CC'd on. The other ones he was not. And I guess that just raises a bigger concern in my head. Is there a back channel going on? Is there a line of communication that the independent agency is not privy to? And I think that opens up a lot of problems when we get in the independence of an agency. And we'd be happy to follow up if there's some context we can put to those calls, we can put to those meetings that took place right here. But these are things that he has waived privilege on that we are able to talk about. But we just want to get down to what that context was and making sure it wasn't compromising the independence of a state agency, the highest law enforcement body in our land. But I'll turn my time back over to the chair.
Thank you, Representative Johnson. Ms. Gray, Ms. Jones, Mr. Fletcher, on behalf of the committee, we really appreciate you taking the time to come here. We hope you didn't find us as being adversarial. It was not intended to be. Allegations were made, and we simply wanted to give you an opportunity to respond to those. We still have some members who did not get an opportunity to ask you some questions, Representative Willingham, Representative Arp, and of course some of the members still had time remaining that they could go back based on questions you've given to other members. Since we got a late start, and those are extenuating circumstances beyond our control, and I don't feel like we made a lot of progress to the original intent of the meeting. So we may find a need to come back and ask you to reappear. And to Representative Dahl's point, it'll give you more opportunity to prepare. And again, we appreciate you being here. And this concludes our meeting. Thank you.